The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome back to another K4Wins show. I love this show. This is my favorite show of the week. I get to go with my homies. We sit here and talk about handicapping. And, of course, we're getting ready for not 1, not 40, not 43, 47. I think I counted bowl games, getting ready for the season. We have our early games. Who's in, who's out, why is that important? Early playoff games we'll get into. We got Army-Navy this weekend. The show will be up just in time for that. And we're also going to get into, of course, our best bets. We'll have some early stuff for the playoff games because the way everything's kind of falling. Of course, those early games kicking off on the 20th and 21st of December, so we have a little time to wait before the playoffs kick off. But he is Kip Keefer, executive director right there, Las Vegas Sun, in beautiful Sin City. Fantastic job. He's been doing this for everyone. He's our jewel in our crown, man. He knows exactly what's going on. Of course, you know Gregory. He's been playing both sides for a long period of time. Knows more about handicapping than any person I've ever known. I've certainly been on the wrong side of that handicapping for many, many years, so I do have something to add. If you don't like my plays, you just go the other side. Although I've been doing okay. I've been doing all right this year. We've been doing pretty good on the show. And, of course, Kip Keefer, who, of course, is the executive director of the Birmingham Racecourse Casino, is going to take the day off today. He's got some big stuff going on as the Alabama Derby at the fairgrounds going on this afternoon. First of all, gentlemen, hope everything's good. Super excited about this show, man. We get down to the nuts and bolts. But before we move on, we do have some sad news, Kai, about last weekend.
That is correct. And I apologize. I am sitting in my truck. As I told you guys, the internet and phone service for AT&T, wonderful as it is, we'll give them a huge shout out here, is down at my house in my neighborhood. So I had to drive 4 miles away so that I could actually get on the call. But yeah, last weekend was our first losing weekend of the year. We went 6-7 Saturday and Sunday. However, last week overall we were 50, 36-1. Okay. So still a winning week, not a winning weekend. And overall we are 347, 196 and 19. So still doing well there and rocking on.
$100 bettors over 15 grand for the year, and we love that. K4Wins.com. K4Wins, the number 4wins.com. Free plays. Just check out our website. You can see all of our stuff, and of course, it gets updated every single day. Thanks to Kai for taking care of that part of it. I know he works really hard at making that happen. Before we get into some plays, Case, I want to go to you first. Looks like Dart's in. Shador's playing. Melrose already said he's going to play. Cam Ward said he's going to play. It seems like this was something that a lot of people made a really big deal about, particularly with the NIL saying, well, gosh, these police guys aren't even going to play football anymore. They're not even going to play in their bowl games. But so far, it appears that everyone's going to play. And if anyone's not playing, it seems like it's maybe these guys from smaller schools that maybe have more to lose, maybe as a second or third round in the draft next year as opposed to a first round guy. And I realize when they say they're going to play, it means they could take one snap and then hang it up for the day. But how does that play out in Las Vegas? You're talking about some of the most important keys and parts of a lot of football teams that you don't know if they're playing. Maybe it's all the way up to a game day before you find out if a guy's going to be stepping out. And how do you handicap that?
Yeah, well, it's very on top of my mind. I just wrote about this. The stories doesn't run till tomorrow in Las Vegas Sun, LasVegasSun.com. But you can read about it. It's kind of what I kicked off my bowl column that I pick every game every year on, and because you have to. I mean, this is the reality of betting bowl games now. But I will say I kind of went with the tone that you did. There's been a lot fewer opt-outs this year, and it's hard to tell. There's still so much secretness, and these deals aren't public, but I know there's been a lot of speculation that a lot of these newer NIL deals are including the guys have to play the whole season, even if it's the bowl, or maybe they get an extra payout if it's the bowl. But, I mean, you listed some of the big names. Yeah, I know Shador Sanders, Travis Hunter, Cam Ward. Those are the first three. I think they all announced together, like on an Instagram Live, they were playing their bowl games. So opt-out wise, I mean, I think you can make a case the last 2 years that was like the single biggest factor of betting bowls, where you had to see what guys are opting out, who was playing on what. Now I think it's kind of flipped back to the transfer portal. I think you nailed it. I mean, that's always been a huge factor too, but I just feel like it was 7 years ago we started seeing the opt-outs, and this is the first year where it feels like, at least right now, that we're still early, things could change, but I feel like we're a little bit down on the opt-outs, but that transfer portal is going to keep churning. So to me, at least bowl-wise, my process, I try to do the same at the beginning. I put a rough number on it, kind of right off the top of my head. Then I do some more digging and put a more exact number on it. But then before I do anything, I'm calling up one of these opt-out and transfer portal trackers. The best one I've seen this year is on the Action Network. I have a good friend of mine from college, Thor Nystrom, I think bettingpros.com usually does one. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet this year, but usually he has a really extensive one. So for me, it's still putting numbers first, but then looking at, who's gone, who's staying. And then it's a lot more art than science of trying to figure out exactly how that affects the number. Of course, the coaching staffs too. But I think you can make a case that this bowl season is going to be a little more intriguing than the last couple of years, despite the 12-team playoff, just because it looks like so many of these guys will play. But again, we just got to monitor it throughout.
We'll get into Indiana, Notre Dame, SMU, Penn State, Clemson, Texas, Tennessee, and Ohio State. I know that the man up there in the upper left-hand corner is loving that last ball game. They get to play one of those early games at the shoe up there. But I do want to talk about the big game going on this weekend, Army-Navy. It's funny because 4 or 5 weeks ago we were talking about, are they going to be playing in the championship game? They're going to be playing twice. They're not. But both teams had stellar years. Of course, Army more so than Navy. And again, the NLL doesn't really mess with this so much. The transfer portal, you can't really transfer to Navy or Army. You're either in or you're out. So we know what we're getting this particular ball game. Army giving up 6.5 and 38.5. What sticks out to you? And obviously, congratulations and thank you to your son for all of his service he does for the wonderful Army, Navy, and Air Force and the Marines. But we greatly appreciate that, man.
My heart, since Dawson is a Marine, my heart is going to be with Navy. Yep. Since the Marines are part of the Navy. But looking at this game, how about this? Combined 19 wins for these two teams going in, the most ever when they're playing. Some useless stats that you like to throw out. The last 12 losing teams have scored 17 points or less. Navy is really struggling, in my opinion. I think the best play in that game is probably Army over their team total of 22.5. I really think they get to 24 or 28 the way they've been playing. And I could see a 24 to 10 game to stay under, but I could also see a 28 to 20 game and go over. I'm probably going to stay away from that total except for Army. Team total over, but I'm going to be sitting back pulling for Navy as hard as I can.
It looks like Horvath's going to be going for Navy, which is great news for them. You mentioned last 10 years, only 3 times has Navy or Army scored over 20 points out of the 20 scores, which is unbelievable. And 8 of the last 10 ball games between these two teams has been a 1-possession game. I can't help but think this is going to be just a sloppy game. I think that number 6.5, 7. If it's 7, I'm playing Navy. If it's 6.5, I'll leave it alone. What do you think, Case?
Yeah, this is actually fun. You guys, it's a good year we're doing the first show because I feel like I almost never have an opinion on Navy Army. It's always about right. And this year it is the exact opposite. I feel very strongly about this game. I'd say maybe not as much side, kind of side, and definitely total. The first bet I made was I really liked Navy actually at +7. I know they've been trending downwards, but this looks like it's going to be the healthiest they've been in a while. They've had extra time, like you said. Horvath is playing. I know our Army has been the better team. There's no debating that. But Navy at their peaks of the season has been just as good. This is usually, like you said, a cagey, close game where neither team's going to run away from each other. So just getting the full touchdown, to me, I couldn't resist. Now, I don't see any 7s left, all 6.5s. I would still lean that way, maybe just make it a smaller bet, but I like Navy +7. And then it doesn't sound like you guys are necessarily going to jump down my throat for that. Maybe if Kip was here, I just assumed someone would have a big problem by next one, but I really like the over here, actually. I bet over 38. There's still some 39.5. Like, look, I get the historical precedent. You go back the last 20 years. If you're betting under, you're winning all the time. But these offenses are just way more dynamic and way better than they have been in traditional years that they can do. That they can, especially Navy can throw the ball. Army can throw the ball too. They just haven't had to. They've won because of the way that they could still destroy folks on the ground. If you do this the way I do it and look at it more statistically and try to forecast based on, past games, I don't think there's any way you can not get this total like near 50, like in the upper 40s. Yep. Now, I know you pump the brakes on that and you say, okay, well, it's kind of the pageantry of the game. These teams play slow. They try not to run away from each other. They try to have these super long possessions. So I can say, okay, I'll make the biggest adjustment I could possibly ever make, and I'll knock off a whole touchdown off the total. I still think that conservatively you're at like 41. I usually need like 1.5 to make any bet, but I still just think 38, anything, below 40 I kind of like the over here. I just think these offenses aren't being given enough credit for how much better they've been compared to kind of their historical baseline.
This gambler's delight, right? There's not a whole lot to play on. So, I mean, we're either trying to catch up a little bit or we're just putting more money in this game. We probably should because Army, Navy, it's part of the pageantry. It's all great. And the over is the one number that I play every single year and I get spanked because you know how I am in the 40s, man. If I see a college game in the 40s, I'm taking the over. I see in the 30s. I mean, I was like, is Iowa playing here? I mean, what's going on? So, yeah, but I think you're totally right. These offenses are totally different than the offenses that we're used to seeing because they're running all kinds of different formations out of the running game. And again, neither team really good against the rush all year long. So they're going to be running it down their throats. And I could see a couple of 50 or 60 yarders. You get me a couple of chip touchdowns. I kind of like the over that game. So I'm going to be hopping on that over 38. So yeah, I kind of like that too.
Kip is the historical guy. So since he's not here, we can throw out for him. I bet almost for sure that he's on the under. So
I just, it's amazing because when you're looking at a game like that and you've got the over, man, all of a sudden 38 sounds like a lot of points. But when you got the under, man, it seems like it's nothing. I mean, it just takes one turnover to totally split the day. And again, when you got the over, you're always in the game. So I know a lot of people, a good friend of mine, Herb Winches, used to say that all the time. Always take the over because you're always in the game. It's never over. You're always going to be playing the game. So before we get into some of the playoff games, we are a local show here in Birmingham, but we're played nationally and internationally. You can hear us, of course, right here, wherever you get your favorite podcast. On every major industry, we're available on everything on Tony Kurre Radio podcast called K4Wins podcast, K4Wins. So make sure you check it out. But obviously, there are a lot of people here that love that Alabama, and an interesting little line a little bit. Obviously, Alabama gets snubbed. Some people are already talking about what was the season where Alabama just laid the egg. It came out in the playoffs or came out in the bowl game and just didn't show up at all. And some people are like, is that the Alabama we're going to see? Giving up 10 against the Wolverines. 10 sounds like a bargain 3 or 4 weeks ago, and all of a sudden Michigan seems to be playing pretty well. Case, what are you seeing in Vegas on this line?
Yeah, some Michigan interest for sure. Definitely some money on the Wolverines throughout the week. I definitely saw higher than 10. I think it opened maybe more like 12 and a half. And I don't know. For me, I haven't dove super into this game since it's further away, but I haven't seen a whole lot of opt-outs. I think you guys would know better. You already mentioned Jalen Milroe plans to play. And I think if these teams are closer to full strength, especially at 10, I'll be interested in Alabama. I just, despite Michigan's, strong into the season, I still just I just don't have much faith in this roster, and I think I'm not like an Alabama truther that's going to bang the table and say they should be in the playoff at all. But I think if they're playing at their best, that they're a lot better than kind of these middling power conference teams, including Michigan. And I do think with extra time to prepare, and if there's not that many guys opting out, I think they'll be close to their best. So for me right now, it would only be lay it, but. I haven't quite gotten there yet.
I do think it's important from a fan standpoint. I'll say this, that, first of all, the kids get the free trip. If you're going to the Bahamas Bowl, who cares if you win the game, you're going to the Bahamas, right? I mean, I get that. And I understand that. But it's important from a fan standpoint for your team to show up in ball games like this. And it's still Michigan. And it's still another win for Kalen DeBoer, who's obviously not had the season he really wanted, but was right there on the cusp. It's so funny because when we have a 14 playoff, Bama gets in every year. And now we expand it to 12 and they miss, which is just kind of crazy. What's your thoughts on this game, Guy?
Well, it's a game that I'm not touching yet. I want to see, what happens over the next 3 weeks, before the game's played. I do have to throw in, though, for my SEC friends. We heard Ryan Washington, 17-year-old, and all these different things for him all year. Well, did you know he's the only 17-year-old to miss the college football playoffs?
There you go.
Sorry, I've seen those memes and that's saying ESPN has talked about that till they're blue in the face.
Yes, I know it.
Anyway,
there you go.
There's other games closer. Yeah.
All right, we're going to give you some of our early bowl games. There's 47 of them. Some of those may be playoff games. We're going to go week to week because we're obviously doing this show every single week. And if it's okay with you guys, I'd like to drop in a couple more shows so we can stay even more relevant. I could do a show with you guys every single day. I love doing this. But we do have this 4 playoff games on the 20th, Indiana, Notre Dame, 21st, SMU, Penn State, Clemson, Texas, and Tennessee, Ohio State. Before we tell you what really is getting our bellies swirling, you look at those 4 lines right there, Case. What's the first game that kind of stuck out to you and you're like, that's really interesting?
Ooh, really interesting. Man, from a line perspective, they all kind of opened about in the range I thought. I will say I guess the thing that jumped out to me to answer your question the best is and I think we've since pushed over this point. But there was a point earlier in the week. Oh yeah, there's still a couple out there where Notre Dame dropped to 7, and that really surprised me. With the way they're playing in Indiana. I mean, Indiana's been great. I'm not taking anything away from Indiana. I bet them a ton this year, but before the Purdue game to end of the year, they were kind of slipping, and Notre Dame has the nation's longest covering streak. I think they've covered 8 in a row and just been pounding opponents. So I thought that number would probably push more towards 10 than 7. So as far as the early playoff game, not a ton of movement, but Notre Dame getting down to a flat 7, at least for a while. It's still available at a couple places. It looks like that was kind of a surprise to me.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. I mean, Notre Dame again, one of these teams, it's America's team. We're not talking about them. They're 10-2 against the spread. Indiana, of course, a stellar 9-3 against the spread as well. They both did really well. Kai, your thoughts on this 7 and a hook? I think a lot of people. I have been touched off by Notre Dame several times. Maybe it's because I'm Catholic, and sometimes I just go against them just because it's touchdown Jesus. I'm tired of hearing it. But man, they're a cover machine this year. Do they get the cover against the Hoosiers?
I don't like 7.5. I'm kind of like a case there. If it's 7, I would be, really happier with that. Sorry about that. My truck was trying to shut off on me because I haven't moved in 15 minutes. I think that, Cignetti's probably going to have them ready. I just don't know if Indiana's defense can keep up with Notre Dame's offense. I think Indiana's offense can score. I'd probably be looking more towards the total on this one, and maybe even Indiana's team total. I think Notre Dame's probably going to cover. Kudos to the playoff committee for actually giving us that Indiana Notre Dame, the in-state matchup. I think that was good. I think it's crap that Penn State got the easiest route in the playoffs, allegedly. I do think they got it right getting those teams matched up.
51.5, so over under, and I think you're right. Cignetti's got some extra time. I'm going to be really interested to see how some of these young coaches do with the extra time they have to prepare. I think sometimes we make too big of a deal. Certainly, if you're banged up and you're trying to get healthy, the extra time is good. But as far as in throwing extra wrinkles in, I don't know how much extra stuff they throw in there just because you got an extra week or two. Should be really interesting though with Indiana catching 7.5. I do think Indiana has shown at least, certainly not against Ohio State, but their run defense has been pretty stout all year long. And I know Notre Dame's going to try to stuff it down. They've been rushing, I think, 63% of the time throughout the year. So I do want to see that line play between Indiana's defense and Notre Dame's offensive line. That should be really interesting. Let's go to the last game on the board there, to Tennessee, Ohio State. I've got to ask you because I know you're a Tennessee guy. Another interesting game sitting there at 7, and that looks like it's just going to sit there at 7. I don't see that number moving all over the place. Kai, what's your original thoughts when you saw you're getting your Volunteers plus a TD?
Tennessee has not been even close to impressive on the road this year. And I know everybody's saying, okay, well, they kind of have an advantage simply because it's at night. And I got to be honest, I think Tennessee's played 90% of their games at night this year, including all of their road games that they played. But, if you go on the road at night and you don't play well, what kind of advantage do you have, the fourth or fifth time you're going to do it? There is a lot of rumor. I've been looking at ticket buys also, and Tennessee is going to travel well.
They do.
I really believe that, there's this thing that came out this week, Ohio State's AD asking them not to sell tickets to Tennessee fans. Tennessee fans have hacked the site, got into the season ticket buyer stuff, and we're able to get tickets early, not just tickets allotted for them. So I think you're going to see 20,000, Tennessee fans there. I do not, with the wide receiver situation at Tennessee, and a couple of them banged up that are not going to play. I mean, Squirrel's not going to play. Not that he's had a great year anyway. I'm interested to see how well Dante Thornton comes back, how Brie McCoy is. But I don't have faith in Tennessee on the road. I just don't. I think the defense travels. I'd probably stay under in that game right now if it stays where it is. But I can't lay 7.5. But I also can't say that I would take Tennessee on the money line. If I was going to bet it, it's just a heart bet. I would take Tennessee. I would stick towards the under here. And my biggest concern is if Tennessee loads up on the run, how the DBs for Tennessee are going to match up against Ohio State's 4 or 5 wide receivers that are going to be playing on Sundays.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting too because I love these over-unders. And I'm sitting there looking at Tennessee because earlier in the season, obviously, they were putting up some huge numbers. That offense looked like it was unstoppable. Last 4 games, 36, 56, 17, and 33 points. Very reputable and respectful for Tennessee. But then you look at what Ohio State's done. They've only given up 20 spot once all year long. That defense is stout. And, of course, they're going to be at home. So I think this is going to be a tough nut for Tennessee. Case, what do you think?
Yeah, this is the one, of course. I've ended up betting every side in the playoff games already. This is the one I shouldn't have, and I did stay away from most of the time, but I kind of saw the number crashing early in the week, and I just had the slightest of leans to Tennessee at 7.5, so I was worried it was going to go to all 7. So I took a reduced juice, really small bet on Tennessee plus 7.5. I know despite us all laughing and talking about how much bets I have, I usually feel like I am pretty disciplined, and it's got to be close to my numbers to make a bet. But this is one case where I veered off a little bit just because I like Tennessee at more than a touchdown, even though this is almost exactly what I made the game. I made the game kind of like 7.25, which in gambling parlance means like if I was the bookmaker, I'd make it like -7, -20 for Ohio State. Matchup wise, I kind of like it for Tennessee, especially we've talked about it time and time again, but I'm just skeptical of Ohio State up front. I think Tennessee's D-line should be a little healthier. And if Ohio State has the same game plan they do against Michigan, which I don't think they will because they've gotten so much flack for that, and that was so ridiculous, I think Tennessee will gobble them up and win kind of a strongman contest. I'm a little bit more worried in the open when it gets out onto the edges. Situationally, I actually kind of like the spot for Ohio State better just because this number is probably 2 or 3 pushing 10, a couple points higher if this was just 2 weeks before the loss to Michigan. So, you take those different factors and my number. There's no way I ever should have bet this, but I kind of agree with Ty that I see it a little bit more, a little bit tighter game, probably neither team, running away and, keeping the score close. And because of that, I just thought over a touchdown might be a little too much. So I know we were trying to save our picks for next week, but I am officially part of the Orange Nation at plus 7.5. It should be a good game. I'm looking forward to it.
No, we'll have some more plays. We're gonna reach out. We want you to make sure you're listening every single week. So we'll throw some stuff out that's coming up, maybe a little deeper into the playoffs, and we'll get into those coming up in just a few seconds. I do want to ask you guys about the Clemson-Texas game. Dabo somehow backed into the playoffs. He is the first team and probably the only team with 3 losses to actually get in. I was like, okay, unprecedented. Alabama would have been that first team, and obviously they didn't. They were only going to allow 1 3-loss team to get in. That'd be the Clemson Tigers. Klubnik, you can say whatever you want about him. Sometime he looks great. I was talking to my son about it. I said, man, I hope they do some design runs for him. He looks like he breaks off a 50-yarder. He is deceptively fast. He looks like the slow white Bronco. He looks like John Elway when he's got the football in his hands, but for somehow he outruns defenders. I don't know how he does it. Not a particularly great arm, can certainly throw mistakes, but he's more of a game manager where just don't screw the game up. He didn't have to throw for 450 yards to win this ball game because I do think Clemson's defense is playing a lot better. And you go on against the Texas squad, man, that game against Georgia, good God almighty, they had 176 yards to 17 yards in the first quarter against Georgia, and they were only up 6-0. And I'm sitting there going, okay, you are totally blowing it here, Texas. You're blowing it. Next thing you know, I look up, it's 13-6. Turned out to be a hell of a ball game. But what do you see in this particular side? I know you were on Texas to win a national title. Was it last year, the year before you nailed it? You had them going to the national title game, Case, but that's a pretty big nut to be giving a guy who's won a couple national titles.
And then I ended up adding some. I think Ty was on it originally. I think our first show we talked about Texas to win the national championship. I was pretty skeptical, but I think after like 4 or 5 weeks, I added some Texas. I think it's 6-1. So I'm back on the Longhorns train. And to be frank, and maybe it'll come back to bite me, but I love their draw for 1, and 2, I'm not worried about this game at all. I'm happy to know about your son because then I could be happy if the Tigers do something good. I don't wish any ill will
I mean,
on him.
3 weeks ago, man, I mean, it was like the Big 12 playoff scenario. He's sitting down. He's like, Pittsburgh's got to lose 2 of the next 3. Syracuse has got to do this. And I was like, dude, just let it play out and see what happens. And then they lose to South Carolina, which certainly didn't help their cause. And somehow they end up getting it anyway. It was just an amazing thing. But good things happen to good people, man. And I hope that Clemson has a good run. I really do.
Right. So for consolation, I guess I can be happy if Clemson plays well for him. But I just, as you know, on this show every week, I've said it, I just don't believe in this team. I think they stink. They got up big against SMU and then did absolutely nothing. I mean, you look at the box score of this game, they were at like below 4 yards per play. I just don't think they're very good. I've heard a lot of people picking Clemson in this game saying it's too much for Texas to lose. And I know Texas keeps shooting themselves in the foot. keeps, like you mentioned, the yardage totals. I mean, every week they're just beating the crap out of these teams and then barely squeaking out wins. But I don't know. I just look at the rosters and what the teams have done as a whole. I think Texas is on a whole different level than Clemson. And if there's one game that gets out of hand, I know I'm not stepping out on a limb here since it's the biggest line, but I think this one could turn into a mismatch.
Guy, you're looking through all the bowl games, 47 of those bad boys. Any particular plays you want to throw out there as a best bet early in the playoff season?
I'm sitting here looking, and if I had to, I don't know. I would love to hear Case's thoughts on the LA Bowl. Barry Odom left UNLV. Cal's quarterback, Mendoza's opted out. The line's 1.5. Does UNLV care? They just lost their championship game. Their coach, got to actually see who's playing in that game. Cal 6-6, UNLV 9-3. That's coming up, soon. But Cal lost 4 games by 9 points, traveling the West Coast to East Coast 6 straight weeks. 4 of those. I think that comes into play when you're talking about that. You got to look. You got to look at the Frisco Bowl also. Memphis opened at 3. They're at 4.5. Chad Scott's going to be the interim coach. Rich Rod's heading to West Virginia. Here's another Tony useless fact that I like to call you out on. Since 2008, 6-6 teams are 62% against teams they play in bowl games with a winning record. Memphis has played 2 teams with winning records this year. They're 1-1. West Virginia was 2-4 in a 6-game span, and they were minus 13 turnovers during that span to lose. So, me there, I want to hear, like I said, what Case has to say about UNLV and what's going on there. I really like Cal in that spot. Again, I don't know, what UNLV is going to do. You look also, I really like West Virginia in their spot, and then the JMU Western Kentucky. I think Western Kentucky, every player on their team entered the portal. James Madison's quarterback's hurt, but their backup's probably as good or better than him. All these players that entered the portal for Tyson Helton have entered before, and they still played in the game. So, James Madison runs the ball well. Western Kentucky gave up 300 yards rushing to Jack State last week. Jacksonville State opened at 7, now 9. I think those are huge plays. But if I had to lay one, I'm going to have to go with the Cricket Bowl. Jackson State getting 3 points against South Carolina State.
There you go. All right.
Don't forget about the Salute to Vets Bowl that's also Saturday, which I can't believe the Salute to Vets Bowl is on the same day as the Army-Navy game, and it's not the Army-Navy game. USA and South Alabama and Western Michigan, 57.5 on the over. Both teams run the ball well. Neither team defends the ball well. I like the over.
Okay. I'm going to kind of go against you. I got Memphis circled here minus the 4.5. I do think West Virginia is going to have a hard time. They're 129th in total defense coverage on that side of the ball. And of course, they do have a new coach coming in, a guy that everyone knows, but he's not there yet. I think they're going to be going through. I think they're just happy to be in a bowl game, and I think they're just going to play like it. They do run 61% of the time. I think Memphis does a really nice job at stopping the run. They ranked in the top 20 in rush defense throughout the year. So I'm going to take the Memphis Tigers minus the 4.5. I'm looking at the Florida Gators. I can't believe I'd be giving Florida Gators and giving up 14 to anybody, but Tulane's not going to have their starting quarterback. I think Billy Napier has just saved his ass. I mean, I think he had to go to a bowl game this year, or else he was going to get fired. And I think what he's done the last 3 or 4 weeks has been miraculous. I think he's got that team believing in him, and it's hard to believe. How many years has he been there? 3 or 4 years? I think he's just done a fantastic job. I think Florida could have a lot of fun with this. I think I could smell a blowout. Bill O'Brien, I think, super happy at Boston College. They've been really good to me this year. They've covered a lot of close ball games. They're catching about 1.5 points, and they're taking on a Nebraska team that I would never bet on. So I'm going to go ahead and take Boston College as my son comes into our pictures. I'll be ready to go in there, buddy. He likes Boston College as well. And then I do like the over. The Army-Navy game, I like the over 38 in that ball game. I wasn't going to play it, but since Case is all over it, I'm going to ride your coattails. And then I'm probably going to play that Indiana game. I don't feel real comfortable catching Indiana because, again, you look at their schedule, but you know what? Neither one of those teams played anybody this year. So, I'm going to take Indiana plus the 7.5, and that's who I got. Case, what do you like?
Yeah, man, you guys did a good job kind of running down the whole early schedule, and I like the hood look. Good shout out to your son. I'll join to end it.
There you go.
Yeah. I guess I'll just run down a rapid fire. Some of these coming up. Salute to veterans. I ended up betting South Alabama when it was 7. I thought it was a little short. I just think Western Michigan's pretty. I mean, they have no good wins. Whoever can move the ball at all has moved the ball on them. I know South Alabama is going to be without Fluff Bothwell. Gio Lopez announced he's staying. I can't imagine that he's going to play when he's been banged up, but I still would only be South Alabama there. I'm on a lot of favorites to start the bowl season, which makes me uncomfortable. The Frisco Bowl, this one's super interesting. I know Tony said that, Kai, said that, it opened at 3. It didn't reopen at 3, but last week, this was one of the first bowl games announced, and I saw a big national sports book at West Virginia -4.5. Someone told me at the time, like, this number is absolutely ridiculous. There's no way Memphis closes an underdog. You need to get on this. Of course, I didn't. I couldn't in Nevada. Sometimes I drive to the Arizona border when there's a real banger like that, but didn't happen for me this time. I did bet Memphis 2.5. I think I'd probably have to stop now at above 3. I mean, West Virginia's had some guys opt out, but they still have a decent team, and I don't think that's true. I don't like the way Memphis is coached. I think Silverfield just coming through, laying points always is a little bit sketchy. So I'd probably pump the brakes now, but I did bet Memphis a little bit. Boca Raton Bowl, what an absolute mess. Like Kai did a good job of pointing it out. Western Kentucky, everyone's in the portal, but last year they let all these guys play. So they let them play again. James Madison without their quarterback. I have no idea what to do here. That's a strong pass for me. I actually got a terrible number in the LA Bowl, but I laid it with Cal when Barry Odom left. Not only Barry Odom, I mean, they lost both their coordinators who got some were interviewed for the job once Odom left. They didn't get it. They obviously now have hired Dan Mullen. So I just don't think they're going to look very sharp on either side of the ball. There's still there's a couple guys that have opted out, maybe some more because they do have some other guys going to get NFL looks. Now down to 1.5. I mean, I wish I wouldn't have bet it at 3. I would lay it with Cal. I know Mendoza opting out is what killed me and gave me a bad number. And I'm shocked he opted out. I mean, we're a 2 weeks removed from him going on this emotional thing about playing with his brothers and coming back to win the game against Stanford. And then he's out of there. But their backup has played some this year. I don't think he's a total disaster. So especially now at the lower number, I would like Cal. New Orleans, it's tough now at 6, but I'd still probably lay it with Georgia Southern. Sam Houston's kind of in the Western Kentucky range where a bunch of guys are in the transfer portal. They might let some of them play, but they've got a makeshift coaching staff. Georgia Southern, like basically everyone's staying, and they were great at stretches this year. They look like the best team in the Sun Belt for a while. So I definitely would have to stop at 7, but maybe right now worth a shorter bet. I've got nothing on the Cure Bowl between Ohio and Jacksonville. Tulane and Florida, I think I was thinking along your lines, Tony, like the way Florida's playing, I really wanted to be on them. But this is one where I just feel like the hype, the momentum, and Tulane losing players, I think it's kind of gotten out of control at 14.
It's big, yeah.
I don't feel strong enough that I'd bet on Tulane yet. Maybe if we got like close to the 17, but I also kind of feel like when there's this big of a move, when a month ago, this is probably like a 2.5 point line. You could even have made a case that Tulane should be favored. I think when there's this big of a move, usually there's some buyback. So my advice on this game to everyone would be just wait. Even if you like Florida, I think maybe there'll be some better prices down the road. But I don't have anything on that one. So yeah, I guess right now my favorite would be at current prices, maybe Cal and Georgia Southern.
There you go. By the way, before we let you go, I got a friend of mine who's a pit guy there at Caesars out in Vegas, and he's a UAB grad. And he is already set. I don't think it's a game you can bet on yet, but he's very happy that Trent Dilfer is back in the big seat. There's going to have to be some firings on the defensive side of the ball for sure. He said the over-under for wins for UAB next season will be 5.5. Initially, what do you think?
Man, that's
I mean, it better go over, or else he's going to be looking for a job, right?
I mean, he must have. Probably you're a lot closer to the situation. You guys would know, but he probably saved his job with the way they played down the stretch, right? Because I would have said, if you would have asked me a month ago, is Trent Dilfer back next year? I would have said no way. But I know they blew out Rice, right? They showed some signs, so that's probably the right number, because I don't have a strong opinion on either right now. We'll see. I'll certainly be diving into every team in the offseason. I'll give you a better answer. I'll take a rain check for about 8 months, but right now I think the Caesar's Pit Boss made a good number.
There you go. K4Wins.com. K4Wins.com. Check out K4Wins.com. All free plays. Check us out. Kip, of course, will join us again coming up next week as we get deeper into the bowl season. We're gonna go through all the games, man. If you got a game you want to check out, info@TonyCurryRadio.net. Info@TonyCurryRadio.net. Send us an email and we'll get right on it. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Till next week.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.